Hello, everybody, and how are you? Um, sorry, just rearranging my chair as usual and clearing my teeth of my snacks, which are actually my lunch today. Um, how are you? How are you doing? I hope that the weather isn't too nasty for you wherever you are at the moment. We've been thinking of the people in Tonga with the volcano happening there, and also the people in the East Cape area and further south in New Zealand because of the tail end of a tropical cyclone going past them at the moment. The Some of you may have actually heard about the undersea volcano that happened to get active yesterday, the day before, the night before last. And one of the reasons we're aware of it is because normally a tsunami is created by the tectonic plates shifting, an earthquake, other words. Sorry. And it causes this wave of sea to move outwards from the location of the movement. But this time it's because of the volcano suddenly erupting underwater and causing this huge great burst of steam and ash and everything else to rise up in the sky, but also creating a sonic boom which impacts the atmospheric pressure, very suddenly causes it to shift, and that pressure in the atmosphere actually presses down on the surface of the sea and causes the ripple effect, which creates a tsunami. So we did have it arrive in New Zealand, but you'll be pleased to know not as much damage as it could have been. Partly, I think, because the shape of our coastline was not quite as facing it as directly. Other factors, I'm not sure. Also, it happened to arrive on the New Zealand coast in the middle of the night because of the speed at which it travels, and it happened to be low tide on the east coast of New Zealand, which means that the tsunami wave size, which was predicted as being about 1.5 meters in New Zealand, was within, is much less than the full tidal range that you get when the tide is going from low to high, so that the movement of it was still within the range. The impact of it was stronger than a normal tidal change, which takes 6 hours or so, but the range of its movement was nowhere near as drastic. It did cause damage because of it having a wave edge, a wave front, so boats in marinas, the marina pontoons rise up and down on the tide, so they're not avoiding it, they're still in the line, and then the wave, when it came in, hits up against the marina pontoons and the boats, and so we have had some marinas that have had sections broken away, the piles holding those sections broken, and boats being ripped off their marina attachments and thrown up against the shore or against other boats or against the marina itself. So yes, we have had damage, but largely speaking, as far as I know, we're all okay. I hope the people in Tonga and the other island nations nearby are. We currently have New Zealand Air Force has already gone up to provide assistance because they have a huge ash fallout in the whole of the nation, but also that I think we're sending up the New Zealand Navy to assist transporting goods, people, whatever's needed. It's one of the roles that we in New Zealand, our military have, is providing assistance to our island neighbours, because there are a lot of island nations in the South Pacific, and we are one of their closest, slightly larger nations. Yes, so there you go. That's what's been happening over here. A little bit more intense than what we would normally like. And on top of that, it's summer and it's rather hot and dry this summer. So I have windows open, I have doors open. You probably will hear traffic in the background because there's a road that runs alongside our house, and it's a connective road between several suburbs, and so there's a lot of traffic moves along there. So we get to hear that, and we also hear tractors first thing in the morning and last thing in the evening, because we are a seaside town, settlement area, and the bay that we live in, up the hill above the beach itself, has a reasonably good boat launching ramp. And so the people who have boats, little runabouts, the little motorboats that are on a trailer, who live in the next bay across from us, the next beach across from us, will often come to our beach and launch their boats to go out fishing, to go out for the day or even longer. So yes, we often get these old putt, 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 putt style tractors driving past at all hours in summer. Anyway, especially around the weekend, just before and just after. So, what else is going on here? It's too hot, I said that. And apparently it's too cold for at least half of the people I know, because they're in the northern hemisphere and it's winter over there. It's not winter here. Oh, I finally took down my Christmas tree yesterday. You'll be proud of me. I finally did it. Still have the Christmas decorations on the front door, though. I should probably do something about that. They've been there for 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Anyway, so there you go. I've been finding out about things like the fact that we now have access to follower emotes. So I really do need to get my act together and create some emotes. I've only made one and it wasn't very good. And it's a sub emote. So if you subscribe to me, you get to use it in my chat. But that's people who are subscribers get to use it. This is obviously all talk about Twitch stuff, not YouTube, because they don't have that sort of system over there. But the newer thing that's now available is we actually can get follower emotes, so that if you follow me, which doesn't cost you anything, do it now. Hit the heart button below the stream, and then Twitch will notify you when I go live. If you're following me, once I get them drawn and loaded, there will be some emotes available for you to be able to use in the chat. But they're only actually available for use on my channel. The follower emotes aren't transferable into other people's chat, only in my chat. Whereas I think sub emotes, if you've got a subscription to my channel and a subscription to somebody else's, say No Hands NZ, then you can use subscription emotes, sub emotes, in my channel and his channel, because you have a subscription on both of those. So there you go. I really do need to get some drawings drawn. And I'm thinking that the easiest way for me to do it, actually, because I haven't a clue how to use my graphics tablet, I don't have those skills yet, is to actually get out my pencil, sketch things, and then wrong side of the bundle of pens, sorry, that's all the green ones, and then get my markers and actually just draw over the pencil marks on paper and then scan them and tweak them once I've got them on the computer that way. That would be easier than drawing from scratch when you don't have the skills. I can trace with a pen or a pencil, kind of, that'll do, that will work, and then we can change them later on, and you can use them if you want here on my channel on Twitch. For those of you on YouTube, I'm very, very sorry. I can't do anything about that. As far as I know, they don't yet have an emote system over there that's outside of the generic emotes that you can use wherever you are. They may do. I don't know. I don't know anything about that. Anyway, we are reading. No, yes, we are reading. That's what we're here for. Okay, I better introduce myself. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories, and we're currently reading a book called A Regular Handful by a lady called Jennie Chappell. I'm about to get started reading. I will show you an illustration which comes off the actual copy that I have. I'm using this copy, and yes, some of the pictures see through and you see my overlay through it, but that's because the actual image has green on it and I'm using a green screen. That's not a library, my library behind me, or someone else's. Well, it is someone else's, but it's not a real one, not a physical one right behind me. It's actually just a photograph of a library because I'm using a green screen, which is why my hair goes a little bit twinkly around the edges. So this is the picture on the cover of mine. It's got Leslie climbing up into the branches of the tree from the top deck of the tram. And I happen to have scanned the pictures. I did that after last week, the last reading I did, yes, last week. So there you go, we have, and because I'm using the green skin, I can put my hand in front of the pictures again. Yay. So there we have Leslie, and he's just been on the seats moving up to down to the back and up to the front of the tram, across, sitting on one side, sitting on the other, because there's nobody up the top with him in this part of the story. And then the tram has to wait at this intersection because there's another tram coming off another track that's joining the track that they're on, and it's meant to be ahead of them, not behind them. And so he gets this idea, because these branches are hanging over the tram, and normally they're brushing people's heads, so the illustrator didn't really pay enough attention to that part, did they? And so he gets this idea and climbs from the top of the tram into the branches, along the branches, and then down inside this fence that you see here, this fence, which is the fence that goes around the house. I think that's how it works. Around the house, around a house, and so he goes and hides there because he was intending to do something. I can't remember what he was intending to do. Anyway, he has another adventure, and we've had that chapter, and he found some money. And now we're going to find out what he did with the money. Okay? I'm really happy to have my picture back so I can wave my hands in front of it instead of just getting out of the way. So, we shall carry on, as I have already introduced myself. The only other thing I have to do, ought to do, is I hope you have something to drink. I have water. It keeps me hydrated, helps the voice to work well. It keeps your body and your brain working well too. So get yourself a drink, get yourself a snack. I have some cheese and cheese and crackers. Yes, the cheese is being all weird and invisible again. Cheese and crackers. I'll show you the crackers side of it. Something to drink, something to snack on, and somewhere comfortable to sit, unless you're working, in which case just put your earbuds in a bit tighter so you can drown out everything else. That's the cheese. Or your headphones, turn them up if that's what you want to do, or you can have me whispering in the background if you want. But I'm quite happy for you to lurk. And if you want to tell me you're here listening, but that you are lurking, you can write that in the chat box as well, which is an exclamation mark. That's the one that's a stick with a dot underneath. And then the word lurk, no capitals, L-U-R-K, no gaps, exclamation mark, lurk. And then the chat will actually say a little bit about lurking. You don't have to do that. That's just if you are somebody who wants to let me know that you're here, but that you're not actually going to be engaging in the chat otherwise, because you are keeping your hands and your body busy while I'm keeping your mind busy on the story. So we shall get reading, shan't we? Here we go. Right, A Regular Handful, or Ruthie's Charge, that's the subtitle, by Jennie Chappell, and we are reading Chapter 9. Sorry, burping. Chapter 9, A Feat That Failed. And the very last part of Chapter 8 was, as he had hoped, it was unfastened. This is the gate when he was leaving the property. I'm just giving you a roundup of the very last little bit so we can get on to the new chapter. A few moments later, he was running as fast as his legs would carry him towards home, full of excitement over his adventure and thrilling escape, but most of all exulting in the amazement and joy, which he quite believed Ruth would share, of his marvellous accession to what seemed to him like a store of wealth beyond their wildest dreams. And then we have Chapter 9, A Feat That Failed. Oh dear. Can you see where this is going? I can. Eager as Leslie was to get home, he could not, from force of habit, pass the big confectioner's in the high road without a slackening of his steps. Several persons were gathered round the window in admiration of a beautiful christening cake. But the spotless tower, crowned with a tiny sugar cradle with its wee doll baby, and the wreaths of flowers and white porcelain angels, scarcely won a glance from him, for at its side stood another cake bearing the legend in pink letters across its snow, "Many happy returns of the day." And an idea popped into Leslie's head that set him jumping, as it happened, upon the toes of an elderly lady who was anxiously peering through the glass at the tray of yesterday's being yesterday's stock, like buns and cupcakes and things like that. They're slightly stale, not bad, not uneatable, but they're a lot cheaper. So she was looking at a tray of yesterday's. She called him a clumsy young idiot, but Leslie did not hear her, for he had already plunged into the shop and was asking the price of the cake. His face glowed and his eyes blazed with excitement. Here was a chance indeed that good fortune had put in his way. He could please himself and celebrate his mother's homecoming, and handsomely made up to Ruth for all the vexations of which he had been the cause, with one stroke of munificence. Munificence, yes, that I did get it right. There are some words I know because I've read them so many times, and I don't always know if I've got the pronunciation right. Usually, but sometimes not. And sometimes, if you've only ever read them and not heard them, you actually will, if it's an odd-shaped word, you will get two syllables mixed up, and you will always read it that way. So that's why I was checking. Anyway, munificence. And you can look that one up and type the definition into the chat if you like. The cake was only 4 and 6pence, and already Leslie's eyes were wandering to the deliciously variegated piles of fancies. These are extra little bits and pieces you can get. If he were going to do the thing at all, he would do it well, and another of his blackened half-crowns went on a choice selection of these. The shop assistant glanced curiously at the discoloured coins, but she knew Leslie and his mother well enough, and if she wondered for a moment at the aged appearance of the silver, probably concluded that it had just been turned out of a family money box. Yes, because silver tarnishes as it ages. Leslie came out of the confectioner's with 2 large paper bags in his arms, almost as much as he could carry, but the sight of a florist's next door reminded him of his blue vases and the disappointment about the wildflowers, so another shilling went, without hesitation, on 2 large bunches, one of white and the other of yellow marguerites. They're a type of daisy, ornamental daisy, with long stems. By this time he was well nigh staggering beneath the bulk of his purchases, but he had not far to go, and ere leaving the high road for Elm Villas, the sight of a small toy shop reminded the boy of one long unsatisfied desire. I didn't think it was Elm Villas that they lived at. I thought it was something else Villas. Doesn't matter. It's the name of one of the streets. Here, an unsatisfied desire. Here in paper packets, a penny each or 2 for 3pence halfpenny. No, not 3pence halfpenny. That's 3 pennies and a halfpenny. This is 3 halfpence, so that's 1pence halfpenny. Sorry. This is Old English coinage, not modern coinage. So therefore they have different names for some things. 3 halfpence might be bought the material which, when burned, produced red fire. To be rich enough to consume money at the rate of something like a farthing a minute in this gorgeous and magician-like luxury had hitherto been far beyond even the airiest flights of hope. Never in all his life had Leslie been able, with regard to the more pressing needs of peanuts, pop guns or pencils, to afford himself the extravagance of a pennyworth of coloured fire. Now was his time. And an illumination on such a double occasion of rejoicing as mother's birthday fete and her return home after a week's absence might be excused by even Hannah, he thought. Leslie's outlook was half hidden by his parcels and the nodding daisies as he turned into the quiet side street called Laurel Villas. There you go. I didn't think it was whatever the other one was. Elm Villas. Laurel Villas. Thus he did not notice that a telegraph boy was just leaving the gate of number 4. That's his house. And the lad himself passed him without stirring the faintest feeling of curiosity. He was laughing to himself to think how amazed Ruth, who must certainly have got home long before this, would be to see all the things he had brought, and how he could tease her with guesses as to where they came from. Owing to his hands being so full, Leslie could not properly knock at the door. However, the feeblest sound could not fail to fetch Ruth, who of course would be waiting and watching for him. He rather wondered that Bobby's chubby face was not as usual at the window, and to his surprise there was not a sound of anyone coming to answer his summons. Was it possible that after all his delays he was still home first? Where could the others be? Leslie set his parcels down on the doorstep and stepped in at the sitting-room window. It was open a little way, but there was not a sign of anybody within. What a lark, he said to himself with another caper. I believe I can get in. He gently pushed up the sash, which was easy and accommodating. Then, having dropped his various purchases inside the room, he noiselessly followed and closed the window behind him. He tiptoed to the door and listened. There were faint noises of Hannah moving about in the kitchen, but it seemed very certain there was no one else in the house. Having shut the door, that no rustle of paper might betray his presence, Leslie, in feverish haste, proceeded to set out his purchases. The table was already partly laid for tea, with plates and cups, and any moment Hannah might come back to finish. The cake he placed grandly in the centre, with the smaller dainties around it. The flowers being unable to get any water, he stood up dry, as in not the flowers being unable to get water, but he was unable to get some water in this room because it's the dining room. He stood up dry in the 2 blue vases on either side of the tray. He had just crushed the paper bags into a ball and thrown them into the tidy basket when footsteps and voices on the threshold announced the arrival of the other children. Seizing a box of matches from the mantelpiece by a sudden inspiration, for which he would have liked to shout hooray, Leslie dived underneath the sofa. The next moment Bobby burst into the room. What immediately followed we already know, because that was at the end of one of the other chapters, except now we're having it from Leslie's point of view. What immediately followed we already know. Nobody heard him strike a match, but now his own turn had come to receive a shock, for at the first flare-up of the crimson light, Ruth suddenly staggered and fell on the floor close by where Leslie was lying. The faintness only lasted a few seconds. As soon as the little girl was lifted in Hannah's motherly arms, she opened her eyes. What was it? She asked. Where's Mother? It was that rascal of a boy, of course. Who else should it be? Yes, I see you, sir, skulking under there. This last to Leslie, who was peeping out from his hiding place in some terror, not knowing quite how much damage he had been done. You may well be ashamed to show your face, nearly frightening your sister to death with your fireworks and tricks, said Hannah. It's all right, said Ruth rather tremulously as she sat up and took off her hat. Where did all those cakes come from? And what pretty flowers. Did Mother bring them? Has she come home? I know no more about them than you do, replied Hannah. Perhaps Master Leslie can tell, because Ruth and Bobby have been rushing backwards and forwards from the tram stop to the intersection with the road where the buses go through to London, and back home again, trying to find Leslie because he disappeared off the top of the tram and they didn't know where he was. So they've been busy all this time. I'm only giving you that recap because some of you may not remember that. It's been a while ago that we had that bit. Perhaps Master Leslie can tell, though what on earth it can all mean unless he's been up to getting things on credit and running your poor ma into expense that he knows she can't afford. I haven't, cried the boy in self-defence. He had come out now into the open, looking rather crestfallen, for his great surprise had not come off quite so successfully as he had hoped. It was all my own money. I found it. I was going to tell you, only I thought it would be jolly fun to get something for tea when Mother came home. I did think you'd be pleased with the birthday cake, Ruth. He spoke in a rather aggrieved tone, and tears of disappointment were not far from his eyes. So am I, dear, said Ruth, only I'm so very startled, and you know that red fire did rather frighten me. Sorry, I'm just getting this so it's in the right place. Yeah, that's good. The red fire did rather frighten me, But what do you mean about finding money? All these things must have cost a lot. She was still sitting on Hannah's lap, the good woman softly stroking her hair and gazing at her with a new pity and sadness in her eyes. Bobby was silently walking round and round the table, experimentally touching such cakes as were within his reach. He's 5 years old. He's not very tall, but he can reach over the edge of the table. And from that, proceeding, as he found himself unnoticed, to detaching prominent ornaments and corners of icing, by way of testing their quality. Leslie had begun his story of the deserted summer house, and Ruth and Hannah were too much interested in that to heed what Master Bobby was doing. "But Leslie," exclaimed Ruth, "you had no business to take that money. It wasn't yours." "It was as much mine as anybody else's. It wasn't anybody's," he replied. "Oh, but it must have been. Everything in the world belongs to somebody, doesn't it, Hannah?" "I should think so, miss, certainly. Leastways all money does, I'm sure. But nobody would keep their money in such a place as that," argued Leslie. "And besides, nobody has lived in that house for years and years." "It belongs to the person who put it there all the same," persisted Ruth. "But they must have forgotten it." "That doesn't matter," she said. You hid away a paper with 3 peppermint balls in it the other day and quite forgot where you put them. And you know I found them, but you wouldn't have liked me to eat them up because you had lost them. Would he, Hannah?" "That's different," grumbled Leslie, though he saw the fairness of the argument. "You knew that they were mine. Nobody knows who put the money up on that shelf. Nobody ever will know now." "Well, it wasn't yours anyway," said Ruth, sticking bravely to her point, "and you'd no right to touch it, and it was worse to spend it. I'm sure Mother will say that was dreadfully wrong. Isn't it time Mother was home, Hannah? It's later than she said. Won't you see about the tea now, and I'll make some toast?" But Hannah did not move. "You ain't sure," she said, "but what that money was stolen. Looks very like it, I think, being hid away in such a queer place." Sorry, I've got an itchy nose. "Oh, Hannah!" "Well, if you want my opinion, there it is. Might have been marked money and all. Who knows? And Master Leslie's and circulated it. I wouldn't have had such a thing happen for all I'm worth. It may be a appellant court job before we're done." That's one of the courts of law. And raising the corner of her apron, Hannah, to the dismay of the children, began to sob. Apparently it was a done thing that you'd throw your apron over your face when you needed to cry. I don't know. I've never done it, actually. "Oh, Hannah, don't, cried Ruth with her arms around the good woman's neck. "It can't be as bad as that. We'll tell Mother everything when she comes home, and she'll set it right." "Your ma ain't coming home, my precious," wailed Hannah. "I had a telegram just before you came in. She was taken ill in the night last night, and she's too bad to be moved today." And that's the end of that chapter. And I'm just going to check to see how long the next one is, because I do have to go to a meeting a bit later on. Well, earlier on. Earlier than our normal finishing time, and later being after now. Okay, so that one was 6 pages. I'll see how many pages this one is, because that will decide how far we read. We can possibly do it, but I am going to have a mouthful of cheese and crackers. And you can too. It's chapter break. You get to listen to me eating cheese and crackers. How exciting. I'm just reloading the other page on my other monitor. And then we'll probably be able to carry on reading. Right. Just paste this in here and then we shall carry on. Here we go. And if it gets too close to 4 o'clock, I will actually interrupt myself and we will finish the string, because thankfully the meeting is next door. It's a committee meeting, but I do need to go to it. So I shall carry on reading. Chapter 10, Tears and Terror. And I am having a drink of water. So Ruth had fainted because she was startled by the red smoke, or red flame, or whatever it was. Red smoke, I think. And also she was very, very worried about where Leslie was. And it didn't occur to her at the time that that's what stuff was. Right, Chapter 10, Tears and Terror. Mother not coming home? Mother ill? Cried Ruth and Leslie together. Oh, how soon will she be well enough to come? What do they say? I'll show you the telegram, said Hannah, feeling in her pocket. See here. And she unfolded the flimsy piece of paper with its penciled message, because a telegram used to come through to a telegraph office. They would write down the message, which was actually sent via Morse code, and then it would be delivered to someone's house. That's how they used to do them. By the time I was a kid, they actually used to be printed out by a machine onto a thin strip of paper, and they would cut it up into lengths to fit on the page and then deliver it to your house. Telegram, look them up and see if you can find pictures of them. She unfolded the flimsy paper with its penciled message, and Ruth read, Mrs. Morel taken ill last night, cannot be moved today, will write. Oh, and telegrams were sent because phone calls were super expensive, toll calls were, and it was cheaper to send a telegram, but it was charged per word, so you cut it down to the smallest number of words possible. Who sent that? Asked Leslie. Grandma, I suppose, or her servant, said Ruth. And the figures up there mean what time it was. I've seen a telegram before. It was 4:29. That's just upon the 4:30. And this is Saturday afternoon, so we can't get a letter now till Monday morning. Oh, Hannah, what a dreadful long time. They can telegraph again if she won't be well enough to travel on Monday, said Hannah guardedly. Obviously, Hannah's remembering that Mother has not been doing very well at all, because she talked about fainting fits in her private notes to Hannah. Oh, do you think Mother will, Hannah? I mean, do you think she may be able to come home on Monday? The telegram doesn't say she's very bad, only that she can't be moved. Perhaps she isn't really so very bad after all, eh, Hannah? Only not quite well enough for such a journey. Don't you think so, perhaps? The piteous appeal in Ruth's white face was nearly breaking Hannah's heart. The good woman was feeling a conviction deep in her own soul that the end of a long, weary struggle was at hand, and that the children would never see their dear mother again in life. But how could she tell them that? And yet, ought they not to be prepared? I don't know, my dear, she said. We can't know anything for certain till we get the letter. But your precious ma has been far from well for a long time, though she tried to keep up for the sake of you children. You've never known how hard life has been for her. She didn't want you to. But many's the time I've seen her go to bed that dead beat I thought she'd never get up again. I know she worked dreadfully hard painting those plaques and things, said Ruth, and the people never paid her nearly enough for doing them. Oh, Hannah, don't you wish we had a father? It would be such a help to Mother, wouldn't it? Because everybody else she knew, their fathers were still around. That changed a little after the First and Second World War, where so many of the men who fought in the war died in battle. Up until then, at this time period, it wasn't common for children to not have a father living with them. He'd have Where am I up to? It would be such a help to Mother, wouldn't it? I suppose it's sure, and certain father's dead, put in Leslie. He'd have come back to us if he hadn't been, wouldn't he? Of course he would, said Hannah. No, your poor dear Ma has never been the same since the day she knew the expedition was given up for lost. She kept up hoping against hope, as you may say, till then, but ever since, though she's tried hard to be brave and bright for you children, she's been a droopin' and a droopin' like a flower with a broken stalk. And now, Hannah could say no more, but with an arm round each of the children, she pressed them close to her faithful chest, and the three cried together. Then Bobby, overcome even in the midst of eating a fancy cake with a sugar pear on top, that's like made out of marzipan or icing or something, with the sight of so much sorrow, came and dropped the half-eaten dainty in her lap, and joined his lusty voice in the lament. This brought Hannah to herself again. Mussy me, she exclaimed, there's Master Bobby gorging himself on that there stolen property, and us sitting here and looking on. Wonder it ain't choked him. It isn't stolen, contradicted Leslie in the midst of his tears. How dare you say so? He was going to add, I'll tell Mother, but suddenly remembered that there was no mother near to tell. His sobs only came faster. What else is it, I should like to know? Bought with other people's money? I declare I shan't know an easy moment with that under our roof. Sorry, just checking the time. Do you think the baker would take it back? Suggested Ruth, wiping her eyes and resolutely putting away her handkerchief. I'll go and ask him if you like. The cake hasn't been touched, and that cost most of the money, and he knows Mother. That's not half a bad idea of yours, Miss Ruth, said Hannah, looking quite relieved. But if anybody goes back with it, I will. Perhaps he would let us take out the price in bread next week, or a stock of flour. So, covering the cost of what's already been eaten, because they won't be able to get a refund on the stuff that's already been eaten or touched by Bobby, but putting that as part of what their future bills are. Won't they give you back the money? Asked Ruth. No, I'm afraid not. Not if he takes But if he takes the value off the next bill, it'll all be the same. I'll put on my bonnet now at once, concluded Hannah. The sooner the cake goes back, the better. Where's the bag it came in? However you could have gone and done it. Such a crazy trick, Master Leslie. I'm bothered to think. Silently, with many penitent sniffs, Leslie fished up the crumpled paper, and Ruth smoothed it out. They could not send the small cakes back because Bobby had been fingering them, but the big one was perfectly untouched. Obviously, it was the middle of the table, and he couldn't quite reach. Don't open the door to a soul while I'm gone, Hannah cautioned them. I'd put the chain up if I was you, Miss Ruth, and if anybody knocks, let him wait till I come back. I shan't be 5 minutes. If that money had been thieved and hid away, there's no telling how soon the police will be on the track. Does Hannah really think perhaps the police will come after me? Asked Leslie with chattering teeth, when the door had been shut and bolted behind the old servant. I expect she does, Ruth admitted. I know it's awfully serious to try and keep anything you find. Don't you remember that poor man we heard about in the winter who found an envelope with a postal order in it and went and spent it to buy food for his children and got put in prison for it? I'd forgotten about that, said Leslie, turning blue with terror. But everybody said it was frightfully unjust, and he ought not to have been put in prison. You know they did. No, said Ruth, not unjust, only so hard on him because he was so poor. But to spend what you find on cakes is quite different. I can't think, Leslie, I really can't, however you came to do such a thing. She had piled together the little fancies as she spoke and put them away on a dish on the sideboard. The vases of flowers she stood on the mantelpiece, biting her lips hard to keep down the lump in her throat. As she did so, for Mother would have been so pleased with those marguerites. I would say they looked very good in those bright blue vases, better than she had expected. Leslie, meanwhile, sat and watched this dismal dismantling of the festive table with tears running down his cheeks. Grief, disappointment, shame and fear, each great enough to make one small boy utterly wretched, were uniting to crush him beneath such a load of misery as he had never known before. What a change in 1/2 hour from the joyously excited little lad who had set out the table in such a flurry of fun and delight as he prepared his great surprise. All that seemed now to have happened to some other fellow about 100 years ago, and this Leslie felt quite sure he should never be happy again. Hannah came back looking a shade more cheerful. "They were very civil about it," she said. "I told them it was quite a mistake and you hadn't had no business to buy the cake, so they've put down 4 and 6pence to our credit. It's a precious good thing, Master Leslie, that you went to a shop where you're known. I only hope and trust they'll speak up as to your character and your poor ma's if there's trouble coming." "I've got all the other money," said Leslie, "except 3 and 6pence. The little cakes were 2 shillings and the daisies 6pence a bunch. And then there was the red fire." "Well, you'd better hand it over to me then," said Hannah. "I'll put the 4 and 6 to it out of the money I've got for housekeeping. It'll all be the same at the end of the week, and we shall have to make up the rest somehow. Please God, we shall think of some way of giving it back to the owner before it's missed. Bless me, what a colour it is," she added as the boy opened the bit of dirty newspaper and revealed the discoloured hoard. "That's enough of itself to do for you, even if it ain't been marked. Was the money you paid at the baker's as bad as this?" "About the same," said Leslie faintly. Hannah cast her eyes up to heaven in a heartfelt though wordless prayer for help. It seemed to her simple mind that discovery and conviction must be inevitable. She did not quite know, but she felt as though all the officials and constables in London had been hunting for those coins ever since they were first hidden away, and that any moment a policeman armed with warrant and handcuffs might demand admittance to at their door. "I'm sure it's almost to be hoped that your poor dear ma may be mercifully taken," she said grimly. That's a bit scary. "Before she knows about it. It'd kill her anyhow to come back and find her boy in jail." Ruth gave Hannah a reproachful glance and put a sympathetic arm around her brother, for this did seem too much like kicking him when he was down. "We'll see that you don't go to prison, dear," she said, "and I'll help make up that 3 and 6pence. I'll go without butter and jam all next week, and my Sunday egg for breakfast. And perhaps I'll think of something else besides. We'll all stand by you, Leslie dear, and you'll see it'll all come out right." The boy could not speak, but he turned and hugged her with rare warmth, snuggling against her for comfort and protection, as he had not done since he was 4 years old. "That's the way you spoil him, Miss Ruth," said Hannah with disapproval. "You're a deal too kind, and he's a very naughty boy." But Ruth, who was a true little woman, felt that she could not be too tender to the repentant sinner in the hour of his deep distress. Besides, though she might be righteously severe in reproving Leslie at times herself, she was not going to encourage anybody else to be down on him, not even Hannah. Poor Hannah indeed was so upset in her nerves, first by the telegram and next, and even more, by Leslie's confession, that it would have relieved her feelings to have served all 3 of them after the fashion of the distracted old woman who lived in a shoe. She was nearly out of her mind with worry as to what to do about the dishonestly acquired money. Of course, the right thing, if one finds property and cannot discover the owner, is to take it straight and without delay to the nearest police station. But how could she urge Leslie to do that, or even do it for him? Confession would have to be made as to how and where he found it, and what would happen then? Might as well give himself up to the police at once, she thought. Excuse me. After a wakeful night, she decided that the best thing would be to find out, if possible, who the empty house belonged to, and entrust the money to him, appealing at the same time for his leniency on account of the extreme youth of the culprit. He would probably know the present address of the last people who occupied the house, and could restore the lost coins to them. This, however, required time, and the next day was Sunday, in which nothing could be done. Meanwhile, she lived in a pitiable state of terror, which she naturally communicated to the children, Ruth, in particular, soon felt that wherever those wretched shillings were hidden, everything about them became quite transparent, like most substances do in photographs taken by the Röntgen rays. That's, I think, X-rays. And that even strangers passing the house must know where they were, and that they were stolen. Ruth took Bobby to church in the morning. Nothing would induce Leslie to venture outside the door, but his sister was feeling deep down in her heart that just then, of all times, they needed to keep as close as possible to God. Her mother had taught her that the great Father in heaven might be spoken to anywhere and at any moment, and just as well in one place as in another. Yet her instinctive turning to his house of prayer on his own day was a right one, and no more earnest petitions went up from any of the hundreds of souls present than Ruth's childlike plea that God would help them in their dreadful trouble, and make Mother well, and bring her safe home again, and not let the police come after Leslie. But it was terrible to hear the commandments read. When it came to "thou shalt not steal," Ruth felt as if Leslie really had intentionally committed a theft, and that all the congregation knew it, and knew that she was his sister. There was no pudding at dinner that day for anyone but Bobby. The elder children had agreed together to go without all extras until the lacking 3 and 6pence had been saved up ready to restore to the owner, and Hannah willingly joined in this self-denial. She indeed suggested that they might each have one of the Genoese cakes, but Ruth begged to have them saved in the hope that Mother might yet be coming home in a day or two. Leslie's mouth watered despite his heavy heart, but the meekness with which he unmurmuringly accepted Ruth's decision went far to prove that his penitence was sincere. Hannah, as was her custom, went to a service in the afternoon, while the 3 children, with door chain up and bolts drawn, minded the house. When Hannah came back, they could see by her face that something had happened. Her usually ruddy cheeks were almost grey with pallor. Her eyes looked wild and scared, and as soon as she got inside the house, she leaned helplessly against the passage wall and gasped for breath with dry and parted lips. One thought flashed at once through the minds of them all, even little Bobby, though only he dared to speak it out. He clutched Hannah's gown in both hands and hid his face in the folds. "Oh, oh, oh," he howled. "Don't let the policeman have him. Oh, please don't." And that's the end of the chapter and today's reading. And you'll have to come back next time to find out what happens, won't you? Oh my goodness, what happens next? Oh, goodness gracious me. So much happening. You wouldn't expect it. But there you go. Right. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening. Bye.